Batter. I'm Jeremy, the pop culture nihilist, and I'm so glad you found your way to my little corner of the internet for my no-holds-barred, deep dive spoiler review into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This movie was directed by James Gunn. You know James Gunn. He was the guy that was fired by Marvel for some edgelord tweets that he made years ago, before being hired by DC to direct the fantastic The Suicide Squad movie, which became a critical hit for a struggling DC, which in turn landed him a job as DC's Kevin Feige for all intents and purposes, before being rehired by Kevin Feige to complete the trilogy of the much-loved heroes that put him on the map as a commercially viable stalwart of blockbuster tentpoles, after directing well-regarded schlock like Slither and Super. Is Volume 3 a return to form for Marvel? Let's discuss. I am going to be doing a deep dive, so spoilers are on the table. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to have it spoiled, add this to your watch later list. Go check out the movie and then come back and share your thoughts down in the comments section, because I do love reading your comments. In fact, if you've already seen the movie, you share your comments too. There are often two major critiques that are leveled against Marvel, right? One is that there's kind of a consistent tone throughout all of them, as if they're not being directed by individual filmmakers, but rather Kevin Feige himself. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly outliers to this, movies that feel more distinct than others, like Multiverse of Madness or Thor Ragnarok. But for a long time, I do think there was some validity to that critique. The second thing that people like to complain about, and probably justifiably so, is that the movies are so interconnected that it's almost more like a TV show. And it isolates casual viewers to know that, like, you can't just go in and watch one Marvel movie. You gotta watch all of them, and the Disney Plus shows. And if you don't, you're probably not gonna know what the hell's going on half the time. Fortunately, James Gunn was able to sidestep a lot of those issues by simply isolating the Guardians of the Galaxy and putting them out in space to where they weren't concerned with some of the greater issues that were going on within the MCU. Let's rewind this mixtape back to 2014 and the release of the original. That movie kind of informed the form of the MCU moving forward, right? Let me explain. The Guardians were, other than Thor, pretty much the first characters to venture out into space and the cosmic side of the MCU. And while Marvel's signature quips and occasional needle drops were always there, especially in the Iron Man movies, Gunn really leaned into the cosmic adventure with the banging soundtrack and the irreverent humor and just the unapologetic weirdness that was very out of the comic books that other movies previous to that had been a little bit wary of embracing. Fast forward to Marvel movies like Thor Ragnarok, Captain Marvel, Infinity War, and even Ant-Man Quantumania, or Love and Thunder, all of which contain some of Gunn's DNA, few of which do it anywhere near as well. So I think it's fair to say that no other filmmaker has left as big a singular impression on the MCU, for better or worse. But let's go ahead and get back to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I mean, that is why you came, right? If you like Gunn's catalog, I'm pretty sure you're gonna like this movie. It's got all the hallmarks. Irreverent humor mixed with sometimes cloying earnestness, imaginative settings, slow motion walking to cool music, and cameos galore. Oh, and don't let me forget to mention all the body horror, animal abuse, face ripping, viscera genocide, and grim revelations. More on that later. True to the series, it's a movie about misfits, finding each other and finding some sense of belonging. And despite its darker themes, I feel like overall it's a great time at the movies, albeit probably 15 minutes too long, and containing a few just really awkward beats. Look, I like James Gunn, but sometimes his humor just doesn't connect with me. Just reread some of those tweets. That's not funny. It's not even really a joke. It's just an edgelord aiming for provocation. That's all it is. Hey, you. Yeah, you. The Pizzagate weirdo who stumbled across my video while looking for 10 reasons why the MCU is racist against white men. This doesn't confirm that Hollywood is run by pedophilic lizard people who groom children into sex objects to be consumed by the masses. Lizard people don't even exist. Gunn's probably not a creep, just a troll. I mean, look at the movies that he's made that weren't produced by Disney. There's a line that you don't expect movies to cross, and Gunn just tramples all over them. Like in Suicide Squad, when Peacemaker and Bloodsport shoot up all those allies of theirs in that amazing one shot. Is it awesome filmmaking? Fuck yeah. Is it also pretty vile? Yeah. If our motley crew of heroes did that in Guardians of the Galaxy, it may affect the way that we look at them and make them a little less sympathetic. You remember when that character Libby just gets her fucking face blown off in Super? It's pretty intense. And look, I understand there actually is a point and a reason thematically why he does that in both movies, but it's just the way that he chooses to frame it and capture it, that I could just see him on the set of the movies walking with a huge smug grin on his face, being like, ha ha ha, I'm such a provocateur. With Guardians of the Galaxy, I think he's still able to stay true to his sensibilities, but he's forced by the studio to dial it back, and as far as big budget mainstream filmmaking goes, I think the movies are better for it. With Volume 3, after all of the success that he's had, they loosen the reins a little bit. And they're just like, hey, James, you do you. And it kind of creates a dissonance sometimes. And here's a few examples to kind of justify what I'm saying. Rocket saving all of these animals at the very end of the movie, and the people from nowhere are like accepting them with open arms. And this monkey comes running out of nowhere and just jumps on this lady's face and starts attacking her. Kind of similar to what Rocket did to the main villain of the movie, who, kind of did something to deserve it. This poor lady's just trying to help. Is it hilarious? Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the funniest moments in the movie. But I do think it kind of undermines the emotional beat that you're supposed to be getting out of it. I think right around there, Peter gets launched off into space and is unable to make it back in time, and his face kind of starts frosting up, like what happened to Yondu in Volume 2. But then all of a sudden, it starts like blowing up and getting all swollen. It's like real Quasimodo-esque. And, It's just a visual gag. It goes away a minute later, and it got me thinking, like, why didn't Yondu's face do that? I don't know. Maybe it's because he's like a alien race or something. I don't know. Best not to think too much about it. How about when Gamora rips the High Evolutionary's face off? What the fuck? What was that? That was wild. It's also even more awkward because there's I swear it's this weird ADR line where one of the characters is like, it's just a mask. It's like, is it, dude? I know, Gamora's kind of an asshole, and this is like an old version of Gamora. She's been portrayed to be ruthless before, but to see her as sadistic is just a weird choice. It also occurred to me in the hallway scene that all of those jobbers that they're just hacking and slashing their way through, they're a bunch of creatures that were kind of subjected to the exact same torture that Rocket was, that we're supposed to feel super bad about, and it just kind of made me sad. But that hallway scene, it was badass, right? Holy shit, it was like part Old Boy, part Snowpiercer, part that Daredevil hallway fight scene. It was amazing. Loved every second of it. Just hyper violent. I couldn't help but notice the way these different characters were dispatched, right? Like I just mentioned, those creatures, just blood and viscera flying everywhere, and then a human will get stabbed or shot and there's not a drop of blood on them. This is by far the goriest movie in the MCU, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I actually really liked that scene. It was super cool, dramatically different from a shootout that happened previously on Orgascope. But let me circle back to the Orgascope stuff right after I finish complaining about everything. Look, I'm probably coming off as a prude here, and that's definitely not my intention. I love violence. It's like my second favorite thing, right after sex. But it's kind of weird to see it in a Marvel movie. Like, it would be weird to see a sex scene. They tried it in Eternals, and it felt weird. I mean, this is the franchise where the audience that I saw this movie with, they applauded when Star-Lord said fuck. Do you realize how much in Arrested Development you have to be to applaud when a character says fuck? I say fuck all the fucking time and nobody gives a fuck. But let me close out the negatives and get to the good stuff. There's just a couple of things. but let me close off the negative stuff. I actually really did like this movie, but there's just a couple more things I gotta hit on. One being the High Evolutionary. All right, let me close off the bad stuff, because I actually do really like this movie. I'm just trying to illustrate why I think James Gunn's a weirdo. But let's talk about the High Evolutionary, this movie's big bad. He's just lame. This feels like a Phase 1 Marvel villain. Just real arch, you know? Just a straight up trope. He's the mad scientist. And that's about it. Don't get me wrong, the performance is fine. Just didn't have a lot to work with and didn't really do much to move the needle for me. But to be fair, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is much more concerned with tying off some of the loose ends of the characters and making a fulfilling end to this saga, not introducing a villain that's going to carry over like Thanos or something like that. So functionally, fine on his own. This is a Rocket movie. A really fucking good Rocket Raccoon origin story. I mean, at the end of the movie, he even says, "I am Rocket Raccoon." Kind of like the "I am Iron Man" thing. And the audience, we clapped like Star-Lord just said the F word. It starts with Rocket just kind of walking the streets of nowhere with Peter Zoom listening to Creep by Radiohead. Oh man, it is so perfect. It's like a great way to reestablish the conflicts that this character's going through. He's trying to come to terms with his just heart-wrenching origin story. He and Peter are at a super low point. He's dealing with this while Peter is just drowning in the bottom of a bottle, not able to get past the fact that Gamora that he loved is gone and has been replaced by another Gamora. But yeah, Rocket, he's a tragic character. He's the most tragic character on the team, and James Gunn has admitted that he's his favorite member of the team. And let's just give some appreciation to Rocket. Like, what a fully realized and well-developed CGI character, right? And Bradley Cooper, I feel like he's underappreciated by Marvel fans. Like, I also don't ever see him doing press for these movies, but like, where Vin Diesel gets all this credit for saying "I am Groot" 6,000 different ways, it's like Bradley Cooper is actually putting in a layered and nuanced performance, and it really does bring this character to life. I say we all give some love to Bradley Cooper for his, take on Rocket Raccoon. It was weird to see Gamora rip that guy's face off. Like, I think most people can agree that was fucking weird. But Rocket has always been portrayed as being a little sadistic. Like, Rocket is gleeful about stealing legs and eyeballs and shooting places up and detonating bombs. Like, he's a wild boy. And this movie aims to kind of explain that and make us understand why he's like that. Throughout, we're shown flashbacks to his creation, from when he's like a little baby raccoon that gets stolen away from all his siblings, to him learning and growing and putting his trust in the High Evolutionary, while the High Evolutionary like promises that he's going to transcend and go to this better version of the world where the skies are blue, and he trusts him as he's learning and trying to come to terms with the fact that he's been, just tortured and surgically modified to be like this cybernetic hybrid. And we also see him like connect with this group of friends who are also like cyborg freak animals. We got like, they look like they were created by Sid from Toy Story. There's like a bunny with mechanical spider legs. There's a walrus on wheels with like the Clockwork Orange pried open eyes. And then there's a sea otter named Lila who's got like robot arms and legs. They're like cute and horrendous at the same time, but through these outcasts, Rocket finds a sense of belonging. And by the time that they're gone and murdered at the end, he's lost the innocence. He's lost the kind of naivety that he had throughout the movie. And he's able to exact his revenge on the High Evolutionary. And we know we should feel catharsis because everybody loves a good revenge story. But Rocket is just left feeling hollow and empty. Those relationships that he made, they're still gone. This didn't bring him peace, and now the High Evolutionary's like out to track him down to figure out why he's so smart, while the Guardians are trying to save his life. Because we cut back to, and all of a sudden Adam Warlock just comes flying into nowhere, busting through like the fucking Kool-Aid Man, and just grabs Rocket and almost kills him, and then goes to work on the rest of the Guardians, and he's pummeling fucking Drax, just about to kill him. And Nebula comes in and stabs him at the end, and he's like, oh, that hurt, and he kind of flies away, and we know he's going to be back because he's been sent to capture Rocket to bring him to the High Evolutionary. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have high expectations about Adam Warlock, so I wasn't like, I don't know, let down. I can understand, you know, if you're a fan of the comic and Adam Warlock's like your favorite character, it might be a shame to see after 6 years of build up that he kind of is just like a joke side character in this movie. I thought he was pretty funny, especially that scene where he just completely incinerates that hostage. It did remind me a little bit of a similar scene in Thor Ragnarok where the Grandmaster fries that guy thinking that the blaster was set to stun. Still effective. I really enjoyed it. I also liked that after he did it, he like felt really guilty about it, so he took the guy's pet as his own. Anyways, just that was a funny little bit. He's definitely a physically imposing force, and when he was fighting at the beginning, I started to notice that the director of photography was doing some pretty distinctive stuff. Like when a punch would get thrown in a flurry, the camera's almost like jolting with the action, or when he spears somebody through a building, it's like the way that the camera follows the action is pretty distinct. So like, even though I don't want to see a lot of this stuff like become a mainstay in the future of cinema or something like that, props to them for making this movie feel and look distinct among so many other ones, you know? Like, you got to give it up to people for innovating. Even if it doesn't work, they took a swing, and I respect it. So yeah, moving on to another, relationship that's really important to this story, and that is the relationship between Peter and Nebula. Gamora. I always do that. Peter and Gamora, that's what I'm trying to say. One of my personal critiques about the MCU has been the introduction of multiverse and the introduction of time travel. I feel like these are like big giant magic delete buttons for screenwriters where like they can just like rewind, let's go back, let's make Killmonger the Black Panther instead of making him the villain, or whatever it is. Oh, we don't like that Black Widow died. Let's go into the multiverse and grab another version of her where everything was exactly the same, only she didn't die at that point. That really undermines the dramatic stakes. But what they did with Gamora really does a lot to, shut down my argument in this case, because while it's the same actress playing the same character and name, we are so defined by our lived experiences that not having gone through the same thing that our Gamora did, this is a completely different character. And Peter, he's defined very much by his inability to let go in this movie. And it's shown as being a destructive force in this particular relationship. Like, he just can't get past it. When he looks at her, he sees what the audience sees, and that is Gamora. No matter how many times she fucking insists, I am not Gamora. I am not that person. I am me, damn it. It's hard to separate for Peter, understandably so, but I think it's just such a really great way to underline that, like, no, there still are stakes. Like, bringing back a character doesn't mean that it's just going to reset things to the status quo. And speaking of which, there was a really high likelihood that they would have just made Gamora fall back in love with Peter at the end of the movie, and everything would be right in the world, but that's not exactly what this story's about, and I appreciated that. I think they didn't take the easy way out, but they did give Peter a full arc where he did have to let go of that relationship. But letting go is not always a good thing. There's not like a one-size solution for everything, and I love that Peter's inability to let go is also what makes him heroic. It's also what's responsible for saving Rocket at the end of the movie. He just won't accept that Rocket's gone, and you're kind of like, dude, you're not learning your lesson. But then all of a sudden it works, and Rocket comes back and you're like, oh man, see, sometimes not letting go is a good thing and other times it's a bad thing. And I really like that there's a complexity there and shades of gray. Really like what they did with Peter and Gamora. I also really like what they did with Drax and Mantis. It started in the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, and it carried over into this movie, and I think the movie's a lot better for it because they're a great pairing. Not like a couple, but a pairing. They're kind of an odd couple. They're friends, and the way that they play off of each other leads to some of the best comedic moments in the franchise. Gunn really saw how you could do something interesting with the two of them. And I did mention earlier that sometimes the sentimentality can be a little cloying, and it's almost as if it's telegraphing the way that you're supposed to feel or spelling it out too broadly. But, because Mantis kind of views the world through the lens of empathy, I think that her performance does a really good job of selling those moments. Like, there are a couple really touching moments that Mantis is responsible for. Just the way that she perceives Drax compared to the rest of the team it's really sweet and touching. And I also like when she chills out the not Rathtar thing by touching it and realizing it's scared, it's afraid, and doesn't know how they're going to react to it, so it's lashing out, and she's able to connect with it. Then they ride him into that room like fucking Rancors from the Book of Boba Fett, and then just dismount him and walk away. But it was cool looking, and there's a lot of those moments that are just like, that looks fucking cool. A lot of slow motion walking and hero shots with fucking dope needle drops in the background, like No Sleep in Brooklyn, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, or Faith No More's We Care a Lot. There's some good needle drops in this one. I also really like the Florence and the Machine that they used at the end. It literally brought tears to my eyes to see the resolution of this storyline. I mean, these are characters that I've grown to love over the last almost 10 years. So it was kind of bittersweet to say farewell to them, even though, probably a lot of them will be back because money and stuff. But anyways, at the end of the movie, Mantis realizes that, her relationship with Ego and then her relationship with Drax, she's been pretty codependent. She's really relied on her relationship to other people and never really became fully actualized in her own. So she's got to leave like Kane from Kung Fu to walk the earth to figure out what she really wants. And Drax realizes that he was never meant to be a destroyer. He was meant to be a dad, which is fucking stupid. What a dumb choice. There's a scene where there's all these little gray-haired kids that I thought were engineered by the High Evolutionary. They've got this language that they speak that nobody else knows how to speak. I thought because they were genetically created and they kind of made the language among themselves, but Drax mysteriously knows how to speak this language. And they said, Drax, why didn't you tell us he knew how to speak this language? And he said, you never asked. Nebula's like, yeah, you're going to be a really good dad. And it's like, I just now saw him take a little girl off their feet by pegging them with a fucking dodgeball right before the High Evolutionary just genocides a whole planet full of people. But yeah, Drax works really good as comic relief. I thought that kind of sentimental beat right there was a little but whatever. There's a lot of characters in this movie. Kraglin learns how to use Yondu's arrow. Cosmo learns how to be a good dog. Groot still is Groot. Nebula's a slightly nicer version of Nebula who cares about the Guardians. And it is a ton of characters, and this is a ton of movie, but there was never a situation where all of them were going to be able to get the same amount of shine and the same amount of attention. So I get it. It's cool. A little bit ago, I mentioned that I like the orgoscope scene in contrast to the hallway fight scene. And while I do think both are good, I felt like the stuff that happened on orgoscope felt a little more true to the Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy and less like something out of the Suicide Squad, which is what I felt the hallway fight scene was like. And it's not as if it compromises James Gunn's vision, it's just dialed down a little bit. But orgoscope, they roll up on it in those primary color crayon spacesuits, and it looks like just a giant floating STD. It's fucking nasty. when they get in there, they have an encounter with a fantastic Nathan Fillion cameo. He's so funny, dude. He's just like so confident as an actor, and his comedic timing is fantastic. And the interactions that those two parties have in the scene when they're trying to infiltrate the bases, just chef's kiss. Then when they get into the actual headquarters, it's got this really interesting design. It's almost like you're on the inside of an egg. It's like sterile, but then there's like yolky stuff around. It's like a mix between really sterile and kind of gross at the same time. Pretty cool though, and there's some hilarious moments within this scene. Like when Mantis makes this security guy fall in love with Drax. Super funny. Peter's trying to prove to Gamora that he's actually super charming, and that's why she liked him in the first place by, like, you know, semi-seducing this colorful alien lady that's kind of a callback to the first one, but she's just like, it's hard to know if she's into him or not, but she's played by the girl that played Ratcatcher 2 in the Suicide Squad. There's a couple cameos in this scene. There's Nathan Fillion, there's her, I wish I knew her name, Daniela Melchior, something like that. I'm probably saying that completely fucking wrong. That's the girl who played Ratcatcher 2. Jennifer Holland, James Gunn's wife, has a role in it. Maybe she's his girlfriend. I don't know. And then also, I swear, I saw Tiffany Smith, formerly of the Schmoes Know, in like a hologram for a split second. So that was cool. But yeah, the shootout at the end of this scene, it feels like it hits all the right notes. Most of the Guardians are there. And the way that they're working with each other and the comical banter that ensues and the way that they're engaging with the foe, it just feels very quintessential Guardians, and it's not so hyper violent. It doesn't feel like it's trying so hard to be edgy. It just feels organic or orgoscope. That all worked really well for me, and it was like a good reprieve from all of the grimness and the dourness that surrounded it in multiple parts. But that said, I've heard a lot of people say it's too grim and too dour and everybody's miserable, but I thought that there were plenty of feel-good moments throughout it. I thought that a lot of the humor was still there and the heart was still there, but there is some pretty intense scenes of animal violence, and, you know, rest assured though, and you can feel good and sleep at night knowing that no animals were harmed in the making of this movie, because no animals were used in the making of this movie. It's all CGI. So, like, much like 101 Dalmatians, no animals got hurt. So yes, there are some pretty gnarly animal torture scenes, but, you know, movie magic. So I wasn't too bothered by that. So I could go on and on and on, as I already have, but I gotta find somewhere to wrap this thing up. It's already super long in the tooth. All in all, Guardians has always been a James Gunn project through and through, but Marvel forced him to kind of rough off some of those harder edges. And for some, that worked, and for others, maybe it doesn't. I like both wheelhouses. I like when he's doing his thing, and I like kind of seeing him working under the confines of what they wanted for the MCU. And I'm curious, this guy who did Peacemaker, which I absolutely love, how is his style and his sensibilities going to translate to something like Superman? Let's talk about this metatextually for just a second. Back in 2016, Suicide Squad's trailer was released, and Warner Brothers executives saw the movie that David Ayer directed, and they were like, wow, this is way more grim and more somber than what we had hoped for, because Guardians of the Galaxy was a massive success. So instead of committing to his vision, they had this trailer company called Trailer Park re-edit the Suicide Squad trailer and put a bunch of needle drops in it and make it feel more like Guardians of the Galaxy. Then Trailer Park went into the movie and they chopped it to shit, and they threw a bunch of neon colors and title cards in it and a bunch of music, and here you go. Now it's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess, and it was a flop. Commercially, critically, people didn't like it. I didn't like it. Who knows what it was supposed to be, but what we got felt very inauthentic. Anyways, fast forward a little bit, James Gunn gets fired by Marvel, and DC's like, this is a perfect opportunity to hire this guy to make the Suicide Squad movie that we had hoped that it would have been in the first place. Get some of that sweet, sweet Marvel money. So he came in, they must have liked the relationship with him. The movie was successful. I mean, like pandemic era successful, but the critics really liked it. Audiences really liked it. They must have liked it enough at Warner Brothers to give him Peacemaker and then, broker a deal to where he ends up shepherding the entire DCEU. He was so pivotal in establishing the tone for Marvel, and now he's already establishing a tone over at DC. And while they're different, there's also similarities, and I'm wondering if this is going to lead to a homogenization of the styles of both studios. Is he going to be the secret sauce? Are Snyderverse fans going to be willing to give him a shot? Are the Marvel sycophants going to be willing to compromise their brand loyalty to go over and actually watch a DC movie and enjoy it? And are casual fans going to forget, the past movies like the theatrical Justice League or Wonder Woman 1984 to give Warner Brothers and DC another chance after quite a few letdowns? Stay tuned to find out. In the meantime, what did you think about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Let's discuss down in the comments section. If you enjoyed, click the like. If you want to stay up to date, click subscribe. Oh yeah, and of course, I recommend Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But I'm sure you've already seen it. Otherwise, why would you be watching this far into a spoiler video? Unless you just don't care, in which case I respect it. I dig it. Anyways, thank you very much for coming by. I'm Jeremy, and until next time, be terrible. Peace. Oh, by the way, my channel got demonetized just a couple of days ago, and it was kind of a drag, but the net positive was that I made a video, and so many of you reached out with words of encouragement and offered me help and all sorts of really cool stuff. It was nice to see the community kind of rally like that, so I do appreciate it. I'm posting a link in the description to my Patreon. If you want to help keep the lights on, you can head over there, take a look at what's going on. I really do appreciate it, though. Hope to see you at the next video. Peace.